Hi friends, my name is Charlie and welcome back to another episode of Sparkles and Sunsets. Today we're going to be going over Twilight Chapter 3, which is titled Phenomenon. Honestly, I'm just going to be so honest with you guys. There's a major event that occurs within this chapter, but other than that, it's pretty boring. And so I'm going to do the best I can to conversationalize different pieces of this, but there's not a lot to discuss. Basically, it's a snowy day in Forks. It's cold. Bella says basically like the issues aren't necessarily just that it's snowing and there's snow on the ground. It's that it's very icy up in Forks. And so that's what she's worried about. She says it's very beautiful outside, but it's very slick outside as well. And then she kind of has this moment in the morning when she was getting ready where she says, living with Charlie was like having my own place, and I found myself reveling in the aloneness instead of being lonely. And I think that says a lot about where Bella's at this point in the novel. She eats her breakfast. She's super excited to go see Ed Boy at school today. She says, if I was being honest with myself, I knew I was eager to get to school because I would see Edward Cullen. And that was very stupid. So it's like she's aware that it's kind of outrageous that she's this head over heels over a boy that made her cry and really has given her no indication that he cares about her. And another thing, she goes on to state, I was still frightened of the hostility I sometimes felt emanating from him, and I was still tongue-tied whenever I pictured his perfect face. So she's like, he's so hot, but he's mean, but he's hot. And I think that's where Bella's sitting at this point. Or again, is it the overarching, I mean, it's almost like its own character. The if fate is what is pushing the entire story through at this point, is that why that this is all occurring in the way that it is? I don't know. Like why Bella can't stop thinking about this boy who's mean to her, and she's never really cared about boys or anything like that before. She's always cared about like her studies and stuff, but now she's more concerned with like getting to school to go see Edward. So what she says about Mike and Eric at one point in this chapter is she says that she wasn't sure that she didn't prefer being ignored. She's so over these boys that she would rather just be purposefully ignored. And that's how little care Bella really has for these boys. And I think this is important to keep on. We're moving on to the next novel eventually. I think it says a lot about how Bella almost uses these boys and how they fawn over her to her advantage sometimes, I think. Like she's very aware that they care a lot, and she's very aware that she can make her other love triangle very jealous, I think, with the other two boys. Another part that stuck out to me that I thought was really sweet and I wanted to share with you guys, Charlie had gotten up, who knows how early, to put snow chains on my truck. My throat suddenly felt tight. I wasn't used to being taken care of, and Charlie's unspoken concern caught me by surprise. I thought that was super, super sweet. And as somebody who's grown up somewhere like where it's snowy, I don't know, where I lived, snow chains were more for like highway driving, not really like in town driving. But small towns, I lived in a small town, so sometimes they don't get out and like plow some of the side roads, and it takes them even a while to get to the main roads. And so maybe, I don't know, I've never put chains on my car, and I lived in a very snowy area. So I don't know. Let me know if you live in the Pacific Northwest, if that's something that you guys have to do. Is it just icier up there? I'm not sure. So she drives to school. She gets there safely. She notices Edward Cullen standing 4 cars down from her, staring at her in horror. His face stood out from a sea of faces, all frozen in the same mask of shock. Guess what scene this is? This is the scene where Tyler almost hits Bella, but Edward runs across the parking lot to crunch the car and stop it. And again, you can see mentioned, she notices and takes note that he's like clear over there, and she knows because she's very aware of this boy because of her infatuation with him. So she's like, oh, he's clear over there. But basically it happens so fast. She knows everybody's shocked, and one thing happens, and the next thing she knows, Edward's there protecting her from getting hit by Tyler's truck. And she's like, wait a minute, like, you were over there, and I know you were over there. And like, in the movie, I don't know if they like put enough emphasis on this enough that this was like a real close call. His hands moved so fast, they blurred. Something was dragging me, swinging my legs around like a rag doll's till they hit the tire of the tan car. A groaning metallic thud hurt my ears, and the van settled, glass popping into the asphalt, exactly where a second ago my legs had been. So again, close call. Edward was over there, and so she's aware of Edward, and Edward's obviously aware of her. I cannot wait to see this scene play out in Midnight Sun. And again, she's so confused, and there's just like multiple points before she gets to the hospital where she's like, and how? But wait, but why? And Bella's in there so tight that it states in the book it took 6 EMTs and 2 teachers, Mr. Varner and Coach Clapp, to shift the van far enough away from us to bring the stretchers in. Edward vehemently refused his, and I tried to do the same, but the traitor told them I'd hit my head and I'd probably had a concussion. I almost died from humiliation when they put on the neck brace. It looked like the entire school was there, watching soberly as they loaded me in the back of the ambulance. Edward got to ride in the front. It was maddening. Again, Charlie, being a semi-decent parent for Bella, shows up before she's even taken away and is like yelling like, Bella, wait. She's embarrassed. She does not want Dad to show up. She doesn't want any of this to happen. Bella doesn't like attention like this. Like, attention like this makes Bella very uncomfortable. And then she also takes notes that the Cullens are also watching and that their expressions on their faces range from disapproval to fury. But there's no hint of concern for their brother's safety. So they weren't worried about Edward, but they were either concerned at like what maybe was seen or mad that he would go and do that for, again, a girl he really doesn't know. He's brought into the hospital. There's a flurry of other people brought in. Tyler's also brought in and profusely apologizes. Tyler's in worse shape than she is, even though she almost got hit by his truck. Even Tyler's like, how are you okay? How did that happen? And she's like, Edward pulled me out of the way. Even he takes note that this is strange. He looked confused. Who? Edward Cullen. He was standing next to me. I'd always been a terrible liar. I didn't sound convincing at all. Cullen? I didn't see him. Wow, it all happened so fast. I guess. Is he okay? Like, he really is like, okay, interesting. A new chapter, a new layer to the accident that I almost killed a person. I almost killed 2 people? What are you talking about? And Edward pops in and walks directly into the room. It's like, in the movie, I think they do a really good job. It's a very small ER, and so she's basically sitting in there with Tyler, and they can just separate them by a curtain. But Edward is so cheeky that he goes and sits on the end of Tyler's bed to talk to Bella and just says to her, what's the verdict? And she's like, there's nothing wrong with me, but they won't let me go. And then Edward like pulls this thing where he's like, it's all about who you know. And then he goes and gets his dad, and Dr. Carlisle walks in, and Bella already knows exactly who it is because of Charlie's descriptions. He has a remarkably appealing voice. Speaking of Dr. Cullen and like him working in this small emergency room, I know we talked about, I think it was in chapter 1 or 2, how Charlie goes on a whole tangent about how lucky they are to have Carlisle and he could go work anywhere and do anything. Do you guys think that like the reason he stays employed in like a small town like this, and it theoretically it'd be easy to kind of figure out secrets and stuff like that, like he works there maybe because people wouldn't ask a lot of questions because they're like, how are we going to get a better doctor in here? Like, we're just not. And like, in addition to that, I think they've swapped it up, but for like so many years they had Carlisle Cullen as like the richest fictional character. And you think with all that money, like, why would he even do doctor work? Does he just like it? It seems like he'd have things to do. And there has to be more doctors in the area, right? Because every time it's like slightly nice outside, Carlisle like takes his family camping. That doesn't work with a practice. None of this makes sense. And then she's like, please let me leave. And he's like, okay. So like, you gotta take Tylenol, but like, just so you're aware, the entire school is out in the waiting room. And she's super embarrassed. He's like, you can stay here if you'd like. And she's like, no, like, no. And so she walks out to the waiting room, tries not to make eye contact with anybody, and leaves with Charlie. but not before taking Edward aside and asking to speak to him alone, if he doesn't mind. And he goes, "What do you want?" he asked, sounding annoyed. His eyes were cold. This is like a very different Edward from the Edward who just like walked in and like sat at the edge of Tyler's bed and was like, "What's the verdict?" This is a different boy. Like the movie, if you've seen the movies, she wants an explanation. She's like, "No, I saw you over there. Everybody I've talked to said you were over there, and then all of a sudden you were there, and like how miraculous this is." And Edward turns into the gaslighting king of kings. "You think I lifted a van off of you?" His tone questioned my sanity, but it only made me more suspicious. It was a perfectly delivered line by a skilled actor, she notes. And then when she gets home, after talking to Edward and making eye contact with anyone and leaving with Charlie, Charlie's like, "So, like, bad news. You have to call Renee and tell her that you're okay." And he feels like embarrassed and guilty. And this kind of like confirms my suspicions that Renee is like the kind of person to take a, like, mind you, this is a very large incident and I'd be very concerned, but she takes it into like the something and turns into something much bigger. And when she calls to talk to her mom's like begging her to move with them to Florida, just to like go move back home. They're like, "You can just come back home, sweetie." And she's like, "No, I don't. Thank you, but no, thank you. I'm fine. I'm fine. I only got a minor concussion and almost died, but mom, please, I'm fine. I might be protected by some strange supernatural boy, so don't worry about me at all." Again, Bella comes home. She takes care of herself too. And I highlighted this portion because I know some people do, but this made me think that like Bella has some chronic pain as well. I'm like, you went immediately for 3. That shows that you've been down this road before. But it says she stopped on her way to the bathroom to grab 3 Tylenol. On what package can you take more than 2, technically? I know some doctors will like allow you more. You can get like the prescribed ones that are more milligrams, but she just straight pops 3 Tylenol straight out of the package. I'm like, that shows skill in the Tylenol game. That shows that you've had some cramps, some headaches. You know your dose. But I just thought that was interesting. I don't know why they felt the need to specify that, they being Stephanie Meyer, but I had to let you know that Bella takes 3 Tylenol. And so if you didn't know that fact, you know it now. Fun fact number, I don't know, I was going to say, I'm 12, I'd be like, fun fact number 420, Bella takes 3 Tylenol. And the ending of the chapter ends in, "That was the first night I dreamed of Edward Cullen." Ooh. So the next chapter is chapter 4, Invitations. I will get to it as soon as I can. I'm hoping to have a couple of bonus episodes per season. How I'm running a season for this show is I'm running it by book chapters. And then I'll have like 2 at the end where we do other like bonus talks, or I'll show you like a piece of Twilight merchandise, or we just talk about something in the Twilight sphere that I want to talk about. Just 2 bonus episodes. I think that there's 12 or 13 chapters, so there's going to be 14, 15 episodes of this season of this podcast, Sparkles and Sunsets. And then we're going to move on. I'm going to work on filming my Service Dog podcast. I think I got to go change in my clothes because I keep filming both of my podcasts on the same day, and I dress for my Twilight podcast. So I'm sitting here in an Edward shirt. I'm flexing all of my Twilight shirts, but that also means that every time I'm filming a Service Dog podcast, I am also sitting here in an Edward shirt. And it looks like these shirts are so funny to me because when you like bend them, if you're like an audio listener, I'm so sorry that you can't see this. That's hilarious. Anyway, so I'll probably put a sweater on so it looks like it was filmed on a different day. Life hacks. Anyway, talk to you guys next time. If you guys are interested in continuing the saga of learning more about the Twilight franchise and digging through it and hyper analyzing it, then this is the show for you, and I will see you next time.